If you are not touching God, if you are not experiencing God, it's because you don't know God. You are like Jacob. Jacob didn't know God. But even though he didn't know God, he still knew that it was God he encountered. The details were withheld, but he could not deny that it was the Lord. If you know how to partner with the Lord, you can see his glory manifested. And so we must come to a point as a congregation where we allow his presence in our midst to guide us. We respond to the leading of that presence. And then the power that is in that presence will be made manifest. Is that clear? We have need to consider the counsel of God that is sustained in some critical scriptures. In the book of Genesis chapter 28, Jacob had an encounter with God, and on the strength of this encounter that he had with God, he made some comments that serve as reference points to our investigative process. We read from verse 16 as we try to set the coordinates again, because we have a long way to go today. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he said, he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. It means that from Jacob's experience of the presence of God, he could not mistake what he encountered. There are times when you have spiritual experiences and you don't know what exactly it is. But in this experience, the man made a statement. He says, this is none other but the house of God. It means that you cannot mistake it. If you encounter what I encountered, you will come to the same conclusion. You cannot mistake the experience that I have for something else. He called the name of that place the house of God and the gate of heaven. So we are still investigating what the house of God is. All right? It will interest you to know that at the time he made this comment, there was no physical building in the place. So the idea of the house of God is not about a physical building. The idea about the house of God is something organic that has the touch of divinity upon it. And this organic reality that has the touch of divinity upon it can only be experienced to be known. You see, there is no way he could have known that there was such a reality if he did not experience it. Are you there? So what we are talking about is experiential. It's not a building. Because there was no building in that location when he came to this conclusion that you cannot mistake this reality for something else. This is none other but what? The house of God. So we are still on the house of God. When we are done with that, then we'll now go to the gates, the gate of heaven. And you will notice that all of these things are not in the plural form. Gate is singular, house is singular. So the question today is, what exactly did Jacob encounter? It was an encounter of a spiritual personality, because in his own words, in verse 16, and Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. So the encounter he had was an encounter with a spiritual personality. Right there. Whatever it was that was in that place that was responsible for the impact that he received, at least we can conclude that part of what was in the atmosphere was the Lord. It might be more, but we know for sure that part of what was in the atmosphere that was responsible for the impact that was created in the life of Jacob was the Lord. Meanwhile, the Lord was not visibly present, because the Lord is spirit. But the effect of the Lord's presence was felt by man. Are you there? And I need you to understand that at this time, Jacob did not believe in the God of his fathers. He was still a rolling stone at this time. He was still a philosopher at this time. He was still an atheist at this time. But you see, the presence of God broke through in that location, and the impact of that presence brought him to a sudden conclusion that I don't understand the fullness of what is trapped in this place, but I can say the Lord is here. That's number one. Are you there? And the impact was so specific that he knew that there are not so many spirits that can create the same impact. So he said, this is none other. It cannot be mistaken. You see, when you come into the place where the presence of God is domiciled, you will not mistake it for something else. No one touches your heart quite like Jesus does. You can't, you don't have evidence in terms of intellectual evidence, in terms of material evidence about your claims, but you see, you also cannot deny the tangibility of the encounter. And that's why faith is personal. All right? You can't deny the tangibility of the encounter. And God helped him to even have an understanding of what was going on in order for us to be educated by the experience that he had. He came to the conclusion of the fact that that location, that place, was the house of God. Now, for many of us, because of the fact that we know the omni dimension of God, that God is everywhere, that understanding normally limits us to think that God's presence cannot be locational. And I'll show you, just in case that's the confusion for you, I'll show you all kinds of scriptures from Old Testament, from the New Testament, in order for you to understand that there is a dimension of God's presence that can be locational, an intensity of his presence that can be locational. If you notice what happened on the day of Pentecost, you will realize that the experience they had was locational. So I'm saying that what took place that Jacob was trying to describe was that the presence of God engulfed a location, so much so that you could not deny that there was a spiritual personality that was present in that experience and responsible for the encounter. In trying to bring understanding to us so that we can further study the content, what travels with the presence of God, because the essence, are you there? A lot of people think that what church is that people gather for football, for soccer in the stadium. They gather for so many things, but the kind of gathering that can attract the presence of God is what the church is. That the gathering that can attract the presence of God. And we're going to do some form of investigation in order for us to understand what is contained in the presence of God. The presence of God has a content. There's something in it that makes it powerful. There's something in the presence of God that made this man say, this is a dreadful place. By dreadful, he meant fearful. It means under the cloud of the presence of God, you must be educated to conduct yourself adequately, because there is a possibility of harm that can result if you are not dealing properly with the spiritual reality that has decided to appear. This is a dreadful place. Then he goes further into spiritual knowledge as he was granted. This is none other but the house of God and the gate of heaven. So Paul in the New Testament now begins to give us additional insight. He calls the church the house of God. 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 15, just for me to show you scriptural evidence for that. He said, but if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is what? The church of the living God. So that statement that Jacob made, he did not even know what he was saying, but he was inspired to make that utterance that this is the house of God. The house of God, therefore, cannot be defined outside of the presence of God that attends, that is trapped among a people. So if the presence of God recognizes a people and the presence of God is trapped among a people, that constitutes what? The house of God. In the case of Jacob, the presence of God was made manifest to him. Then by the time we go to the book of Matthew chapter 18 verse 18 to 20, we now find out what can bring the presence of God down. He said, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So it means that it will take a body of men that want to operate under the authority of Jesus Christ to attract his presence. And when his presence is attracted, he's not present as a spectator. He's, oh my God, he's present as an active participant. So what makes us the church is not the gathering. What makes us the church is the fact that Jesus recognizes that we are not gathered unto ourselves, we're not gathered unto an agenda, we are gathered unto him. The object of our gathering is to give him expression. That's why we're gathered. Have you heard of a car assembly plant before? In a car assembly plant, what happens is that different parts of the car are brought together, fitted together to produce one car. In an assembly, our individualism is going to be swallowed up, because the product that will emerge when we assemble is one man. Now, how many of you have read the book of Ephesians chapter 6, where it speaks about warfare? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. You read that before? Okay, so the first thing I need to draw your attention to is the use of the word we, not I. Spiritual warfare is corporate, not necessarily individual. A prayer warrior came here. She came from one of the states. I've forgotten the state. Oh, she came from New York. And then she began to tell me her story, how that she's an intercessor. And I could see the marks of intercession on her life. I could see it through the gift that I have from the Lord. But she was interceding for the territory alone, and experiencing backlashes and all kinds of demonic. You know why that is the case? The people that are responsible for the darkness in the territory, they don't operate alone. They operate as a group. And you cannot contend with them and defeat them as an individual. So warfare, real warfare, is in the context of we. And that's why your husband, your wife forms the basic quorum, the basic requirement for engagement in spiritual matters. You will prosper in your warfare if it's corporate. Just bring the principle of corporacy into that arrangement. You will see more results, and there'll be more protection, because spiritual warfare is a we matter. So in spiritual warfare, we are assembled to become one warrior. So if you see the portrait of the legionnaire in the book of Ephesians chapter 6, the helmet of salvation and all of that, you see, that's the description of one legionnaire, but it is a we that produces that one warrior. So that's an assemblage. And in order for us to achieve that level of technology in the spirit, we must all be intertwined with the object that we are demanding for in our heart. Then we become one warrior. That warrior is capable of so many things. It is equipped with a sword. It's equipped with a shield. Oh, so that's an assemblage. But when we talk about gathering is a technology that is required to trap the dimensions of the spirit down into a physical location so that God can participate with men. If God is going to be trapped into the location, then it must be more than one person. And so the Bible says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, they are not gathered to do their things, they are gathered as me. It's just like you were asked to go read out a speech in Maryland on behalf of President Trump. So you get the speech from his office, and you travel down to Maryland, and then during the occasion, when it's time for the president to come give his address, you stand in representative capacity, but the speech you are going to read is his speech, not your speech. The things you are going to say are his thoughts, not your thoughts. You are not there as you are there as him, and you are speaking his mind. Did you get that? All right, so if we come into the presence of God, and the person that leads the opening prayer, before you can speak for God, you must have labored in your secret place to find out what God is saying. Are you there? I'm telling you the technique that is needed to trap the dimensions of God down. Nobody will be healed if his dimensions are not trapped down. Nobody will be saved if his dimensions are not trapped down. Lives will not change if his dimensions are not trapped down. It is through the gathering that his dimensions can be trapped. Are you there? So you begin to read out the speech, and you are reading it as the president. It is not the president that is there, it is a representative, but the representative is not there to do his own thing. He's there to do what the president would have done if he were physically present. That's what it means to gather in his name. So if in our meeting there will be opening prayer, the person that is supposed to lead opening prayer is first supposed to go and meet Jesus and ask Jesus, if you were there in that meeting, what are the prayer points you will lead? And then the person gets a download, because the person is operating in representative capacity. Are you there? The person that is supposed to sing songs goes to Jesus, must go to Jesus, because you are not there to do your own thing. You are not the one to lead the song because you have a good voice. You are the one to lead the song because we trust that you will go and consult with Jesus and know the songs Jesus would have sang if Jesus were present. Then the preacher doesn't come in the regalia of his theological achievements. He goes to Jesus and says, Jesus, if you were to preach in this service, what will you say? And then you download it. So the person leading the prayer is leading the prayer according to the prescription that Jesus gave. The one leading in songs is leading the songs according to the prescription that Jesus gave. The one preaching the message is preaching the message according to the prescription that Jesus gave. And Jesus now said, oh, this is my event. They are representing me. So the difference between you representing Trump and you representing Jesus is that while you are representing Jesus, Jesus will now come. You see, but in Trump's case, he has said, I'm not coming. So that's why I'm saying that you should go and represent me. But in the case of Jesus, when you begin to represent him accurately, he now comes, and his presence, to the extent to which you continue to do that which he would have done if he were present, his presence will be trapped down. That's what gathering means. So he called the church the house of the living God, and the pillar and the ground of truth. So God happens to be a God of truth, and the shape of the house of God must be that it is only the truth of the word of God that is dispensed in the house of God. Why? Because it's only truth that makes free. Only truth. The way you will know that a congregation is under attack is that that congregation is no longer feeding from truth. It means that the possibility of transformation by the Holy Ghost doesn't exist in that house. And very soon, if care is not taken, it will no longer be a house of God. The house will no longer have the ability to trap the dimensions of God. It will be trapping something else. So what makes us stay in a place where we can trap God down is our commitment to truth. That's why if you find any true apostolic functionary, he is mad for truth. Because God is real. God is true. Our God is the living God. And that's why he added living God. Living God. The living God. And if you are doing business with a living God, there will be evidences to show. It's not that difficult. It's not oh my God by himself is living. You don't need to help him. You can answer his name. He can respond to the petition that men make unto him. He can fight for himself. He's strong enough. But whether we see those dimensions in our midst will be determined by our commitment to truth. Because this is the regulation, the regulatory provision that keeps us in a place where the living God can be trapped amongst us. So if the living God is trapped amongst us and somebody comes to fight us, the person is not adequately educated, because the living God that is among us is also part of the personalities that the person wants to fight, but he doesn't know. Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 12, it says, moreover thou leadest them in the day by a cloudy pillar, and in the night by a pillar of fire. Now you see, we benefit from the presence of God in our midst when we allow the presence of God in our midst to guide us. If you are not touching God, if you are not experiencing God, it's because you don't know God. You are like Jacob. Jacob didn't know God, but even though he didn't know God, he still knew that it was God he encountered. The details were withheld, but he could not deny that it was the Lord. If you know how to partner with the Lord, you can see his glory manifested. And so we must come to a point as a congregation where we allow his presence in our midst to guide us. We respond to the leading of that presence, and then the power that is in that presence will be made manifest. Is that clear?